Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm Snappy, and thank you for joining me. And today I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Dion, and our special guest Shay deMontford. How's it going, guys?
Awesome.
Yeah, you go first,
Um,
Dion.
Oh, I'm doing good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm fine. And I was just grooving along to that harpsichord music. I love it. Always
yeah,
wanted
that's
to
a.
do it. I
Go
always
ahead,
wanted
sorry.
to. There were such rock stars in their day, the harpsichord players. Always wanted to do a piece for harpsichord and theremin together.
Oh, that would be interesting.
It
That would
would,
be
wouldn't it?
totally wild.
I had a mini one of those where you could.
A little theremin. Yeah, they're great.
Right? I just think that, the harpsichord has that kind of just that wild, eerie sound. It's always just intrigued me. And that piece is a really interesting piece. I found it in a record of Spanish battle hymns, and it's an
Wow.
unknown anonymous piece. It's called the Zakara, is the type of piece it is. And I just, fell in love with it. So I had to put it on this.
Oh,
I've
it
used a
sounds
couple from
great.
that record. It's a cool record.
Yeah.
But, that's a cool thing with a lot of this old music is that it's in the public domain. And if you get it on old records, then no one's going to complain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. Like I loved it. And you've got a whole Spanish thing going this morning, Snappy. I could see you
Yeah.
like very ruffalicious and on a harpsichord. I can see you rocking that out.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah,
Yeah.
so really happy to be joined today with our dear friend Shay. Shay's from Magic Magazine, and we've done an interview together. So if you want to know more about Shay, please go check out that interview. She's a psychic and author. She was on the Australian show. What was it called?
The one, yeah.
The one. The
Yeah, and
one.
they didn't get there is no the one. We are all just one.
But yeah, we're happy to have her here with us for part 3 of our deep dive into the Gothic subculture. So you were watching our stream the other day and you were chiming in, and then you sent me a message, and I'm like, why don't you just come hang out with us and we can dive deeper and discuss all about the occult and magical roots of the Gothic subculture and talk about how it's far deeper than just the surface level thing that we see in the 80s. Most people just associate it as a modern kind of idea, very camp and kitsch and youth orientated, but it's a lot deeper than that.
It is. And I was so impressed. Like I couldn't help myself but comment in the background as I was watching your live. Because the scholarship that you guys bring to this and the deep dives that you do into the history is really good. And it does make people realize that, the general public sees an aesthetic, but there's so much more than just an aesthetic here. And yeah, there is a lot of, I think, beautiful pain behind all of this. And it's a deep cry of the human soul that has gone on for centuries.
That's a good way to phrase it.
Mm.
I was talking with Dion earlier before we were going, and he was basically saying kind of just that it's this kind of outsider and mostly a feminine cry, but this is kind of this, it's this outsider reaction, and it's this kind of a loss of, the more I get deep into the pagan stuff, I see it's in Goth, I see them kind of rooted. And there's kind of this loss, like Goth is mourning the loss of that ancient world. And it's reflecting this ever mourning throughout, throughout time, basically, as it evolves across these cultures.
Well, we're about to have that new iteration of the Dracula movie come out too. And I'm looking forward to that. But again, they're going into that, existential pain of loss. And if you could reach across the centuries to get back that love that you've lost, wouldn't you? And
Right.
it's apparently in this new version, the French version, it's it's expressed really, really well.
That's so interesting. The vampire is a good place to talk to because, like, when I think about the vampire, we have that Dracula, the loss of love, and also the other major aspect we see is the fear and love of nobility and of power. And that seems to be embodied in characters like Lord Byron himself. He becomes sort of the quintessential vampire figure. And we've seen that idea of this hyper eroticized power figure become sort of the dominant theme for vampires, to the point where, like, with Twilight, I think it's really interesting where it's like they've even become more erotic. Now they sparkle, and they've lost even more of the dark side connection, right?
Yeah, as my nephew says, the sparkly fairies. Yeah, it's really interesting what's happened with the Dracula myth. I don't know if you've actually read the book by Bram Stoker, but in the book,
a long time ago.
Yeah, in the book, he's narcissistic. He's actually not about the love.
No.
And I think this is beautiful. It keeps the story alive. The fact that this Gothic story is getting reinvented again for our day and age, expressing our love and our loss. Right, it's not just a historic love. A lot like the Bram Stoker novel is very much about the loss of sacred, the loss of history, and the Church of England grabbed it and ran with it as an expression of what happens when you move away from God, and it was a loss of God. But now it's a personal loss, that sacred divine, and I just love all these reinventions, these reiterations that we do. I mean, it's like asking a person in the goth culture what kind of goth they are,
right? Well, it's so wild too, right? Like you talk about this with the vampire, but I would consider the quintessential Gothic monster would be Frankenstein. And the same thing happened to Frankenstein, where they, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is still there, but we have this modern version, the film Frankenstein, that's taken on its almost a greater life of its own. That's kind of separate from Mary Shelley's interpretation, and like a lot of these film versions, they've gone so far away from the book. And I don't mind that, it's interesting because I've been going through and been reading a lot of Mary Shelley, and when she wrote Frankenstein, she had just suffered the loss of her first child, and so much of it is about that, like, what happens when you fail at being a parent. And then it's also was her reaction. What happens if you try to create life without the feminine, and you try to create life without the sacred? You take away all of the magic and you make it this sterile, masculine, cold, dead thing. What happens? How can life exist in that? And that's kind of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and you don't really see that in the films,
Oh, yeah. Well, they've got to condense that. I mean, I was quite impressed with the most recent film that's just come out, because it is
that one. You like?
Oh, you've got to see it. You've got to see it. It's pretty accurate, as much as they can within 2 hours.
Right.
And it's but it really brings out the theme that I loved when I first read the book, is that we are our parents' little monsters. We, the badness that's within us, that they write on our blank slate. And if they don't like what they're looking at with us, maybe have a look in the mirror. We are their mirror.
That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah. Right. And I think that's what turns a lot of people to Gothic culture, is this, I am a reflection of my external sources, be it parents, church, state, religion, whatever. But then they take it on themselves and go, well, I'm going to amplify it and be that mirror. So they do actually do this Frankenstein thing with themselves and go, look at me. Because when you look at me, you're looking at yourself. Yeah.
There's also just so much, this constant theme that, like we talked about in last episode, is the taboo. As soon as you make something, is death truly morbid, or have we made all of this morbid? We make it and vilify it. But what you see in something like Goth, or like in a lot of these poets like Baudelaire, is they're recognizing the beauty in that negative. But it's only negative because of a cultural stereotype. And there's always this human impulse, if you're going to make something taboo, that people are going to flaunt it. It's almost like a sacred impulse,
It is. And I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Romeo and Juliet is Shakespeare's Gothic play.
Right.
Because it is about that sacredness of death. you have two 14-year-old kids that fall deeply in love from opposite sides of the track, the love that they're not allowed to have. It's banned. So they fall in love, and the only way that they can be together forever is in death. That's what makes it this beautiful love story, because the saddest thing is, I think that's reflected in the Goth culture about death, is that one survives.
Right.
And the other one doesn't. So you have to live without the other one. And with Romeo and Juliet, no, they didn't have to do that. They had the perfect ending. And I think that's what's made it so popular, is its Gothic aspect. And I'm sure there's Shakespeare academics out there now going, Romeo and Juliet is not Gothic. Oh, yes, it is.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the other thing, is that you can flip something and you can make it Goth. You can, that's the other side of Goth, is the kitsch aspect that can't be separated. One of the interesting comments that you left that you reminded us about was a lot of the 1950s tragedy stuff and a lot of that bubblegum pop stuff that you wouldn't associate with Goth is clearly influencing what becomes Goth. Like, so much of it is a reaction to the 1950s and like a celebration of those silly things like the Munsters and Frankenstein, like those movies,
Monster Mash. But I
Right.
love Twisted Sister did a whole what we'd say in Australia is a piss take, right? So they did a parody of it, and of the leader of the pack, which is about falling in love with somebody who literally burns to death in a car accident. I mean, her parents wouldn't let her enjoy the love before he passed. And it's this tragedy pop has become a huge movement in Japan. It's huge. And Quentin Tarantino has featured it in several of his films. So even though it was 1950s, it's been brought back to the pop culture again. So it's great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so much wild stuff with all this Goth stuff. But Dion, bring us back up to speed. Where are we going? Where did we leave off in our last episode? And where do you want to take us today in our exploration?
I don't even remember where we left off, but I know we were talking about, part of it was, we're talking about the 50s and the 20s, Bauhaus movement, surrealism, avant-garde.
We talked a lot about Artaud and theater.
Yep, and silent film coming out in these movies, influencing Nosferatu and what the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I want to take it to the 1920s again, and we'll work our way back into the Gothic Romance novels of the 1700s, 1800s. But let's start in the 20s. Let's go to the first pick, and we're going to start with someone that's not necessarily Gothic, but like you were saying, certain characters and icons have an influence on Gothic culture. Here is Coco Chanel in the 1920s. She's famous for something called the little black dress. And this is part of fashion. And it's been passed on. The black dress as a fashion statement, let's say. We explored that in the last video with the bride who wore black and iconic figures who wear black over history. And Coco Chanel has an interesting life that would fit into this Gothic romance, let's say, culture. The way she learned to sew was when her mother died, her parents passed, she was sent to a convent and taught to sew by nuns, which sounds very Gothic to me. And her lover that helped invest in her fashion business died in a car crash. So we're talking about loss. We're talking about embracing your shadow side and longing for it, let's say. And she was into the occult at that, because Chanel number 5, originally I thought, well, there was a version 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. No, she started with number 5 as an occult number, symbology, numerology. And she would release items on the 5th of May, 5/5, at that.
Yeah,
she had
magic, right?
Yeah, she was working with something. But we've also talked about her in the past because she has a dark side too. She got involved with the Nazis. She fell in love with the guy, Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage, aristocracy in Germany. from a noble family, a Nazi at that. And she, when World War II was over, she hid from the Allies. They were going to get her. And she left them a note at her perfumery, like, hey, take some bottles of cologne. And later on, she had to work her way back into her good graces.
Wild story. Wow.
You know, and there's a little more to it, you know, and think about this. All right. So during that time, in terms of fashion and those outfits, the Nazi outfits, those SS outfits, you know who produced them? Hugo Boss.
The fashion house, right?
Yep, another fashion house with forced labor at that. That's how they were getting those slick SS outfits, through forced labor. And the other reason I brought up Coco Chanel was because of another relationship she had, another romance, let's say, Gothic romance at that. Go to the next image. And that would be Igor Stravinsky. And, you know, Igor did some wild stuff too. Now, she collaborated with him on his play, Apollo the Muses. And she did the costumes for that. And recently we've been talking about Rite of Spring, Igor Stravinsky. If anybody's seen that, it's a wild piece. Have you seen it, Snappy?
I saw it after, you know, like I'd seen bits of it, but after we talked, I went and watched it, just sat down, and you're right. You know, I was mesmerized for the entire 30 minutes. It's just this visceral, wild piece, you know, of literal human sacrifice. Like, I don't know, like, it's just something you have to see. It's a return to an ancient primal rage. And you just see the scapegoating of a virgin in her desecration in order to call the, you know, to protect and ensure the community. It's vibrant, it's vile, it caused a riot for a reason.
Yeah. In 1913, at the debut, people ran out and they tried to set the place on fire, and they were rioting in the streets of Paris. Go to the next image and we'll show the costume. And so this is supposed to be a Scythian goddess who's going to be sacrificed. And the person who did the dance did the Nutcracker ballet sequences. So the movements are intriguing and they move wild, and it's interpreting an ancient mystery rite. And so much so, go for it.
It's like first thing I did in university was dance, and we have to study that, all right? Because the movements are so different to classical ballet, but it is a classical ballet. So yeah, and they deliberately did this, but because it was so unexpected, it was so jarring to the French psyche, not just because of the theme of human sacrifice, but they sacrificed ballet as well to all of these radical different movements, which were considered childish and unfinished in those days. But now it's expressive.
Right.
Yeah.
They were rebelling against, this was such a big thing, right? At this point in the 20s, right? As we discussed with the theater in our toe, is that a lot of these art forms had become classical, you know, and they've become this Apollonian feature of just, you know, everything is refined and perfected. And it's now about reproducing rather than being creative, you know, and it's like, if your box becomes, you get things where things become truly, really refined, but at the sacrifice of a smaller and smaller box for which the artist can work within. And then you see these artists who are just, eventually they're going to scream at the confines. You know, they can't be creative within such a limited scope. They're going to have to shatter the box, you know? And this is what we see throughout the 20s. And also, I think it corresponds with, you know, in the 20s up into the 60s, we see the radical rejection across Europe and even parts of the West, or United States, like in Canada. I'm not sure about in Australia and New Zealand, but we see this rejection of Christianity. You know, in Canada, where I'm from, they start talking about the silent revolution in Quebec, where between the 20s and the 60s, pretty much most people abandoned Catholicism. And you see just within a couple generations, a complete shift in the culture.
Yeah. Australia has an interesting relationship with religion. I mean, you know, 275 years ago, we were all prisoners dumped in a place where everything wants to kill you. So,
Right.
if there was a God, why would he do that? And most of them were just Irish rebels at that stage, Irish people that could read and write and that rebelled against the English government. They weren't real criminals. So, people in Australia have always been a little ambivalent with regard to religion. You always get your obsessive groups in any religion, because when, fundamentalism is just not fun, that's for sure. But I think the beauty of the Goth culture is that it pushes all the envelopes. We
Right.
get this rebellion, and with this rebellion, we get growth. If Stravinsky and Nijinsky didn't rebel when they did The Rites of Spring, dance wouldn't have grown. We have
Right.
so many more genres now. If Chanel hadn't rebelled against, the fashions at that time and started wearing outerwear that essentially was, 5 years before was underwear, it was shocking. The little black dress was a slip. How dare you wear your slip without a dress? But then you have this, women need to be free. They're working in the factories. They've been pushed forward. We need to be free. And it was this whole rebellion. And, all respect to you, Dion, I see with the Goth culture that it's really been the women in each stage that have pushed that boundary. It's been that feminine expansion of, I'm rebelling against this box.
Oh, well, and we'll see that in this episode.
Mhm.
That's predominantly the purveyors of this art form is women, going back to the 1700s. I even asked Snappy, could we make a case that Christine de Pizan is Gothic? I'm looking at every female writer now just to see how are they dealing with the shadow side and angst and the dark arts, let's say.
Yeah, you could argue that for sure, just because, with Christine, you get the sort of the birth of feminism and, proto-feminism, right? She's born in the fires of reacting to the misogynistic male writers of her day. And she's such a firebrand. And so there's definitely this power in her. And a big thing is about her that I can see is very Goth is the reclamation of all of these women who are vilified across history. She reclaims Medea, she reclaims Circe, she reclaims all of these various women, and gives you, reasoned based, reasoned, determined assessments of who they are and why they should be valued and respected as individuals, and that's always a valuable perspective and something that still reverberates. Christine is still relevant today, so for sure. And as a rebel, right, she helped inspire the whole she's kind of the birthplace of the cult of Jeanne d'Arc, because she wrote the first hymns to Jeanne d'Arc that then became this literature that then thrived after she died. But that started a revolution. So yeah, but we're getting back into like these more ancient roots at that point,
which we'll get to in later episodes.
And Joan d'Arc herself. How punk rock was she? Really?
Right? How punk rock? Having visions, leading men, dressing as in a masculine way. Really powerful person. Anyway, let's continue here, Dion. What's up?
All right, next image. Ooh.
Oh gosh.
I consider him a Gothic character too. He wore all black. They tried to poison him. Here's Rasputin. This is about 1906 is when he becomes the healer to Nicholas, last emperor of Russia, to their family, and he kind of takes over Russia.
For a brief moment,
through the royal family, he has power. Wore all black, even eyeliner, black eyeliner, brooding character.
He was
performance
really
artist, I would say.
Yeah, well, he's really interesting because he's a Christian mystic, and he's involved in sort of left-hand magic. And it's very apparent when you start to read into his stuff, because he was practicing this sort of will-based hedonism, but through a Christian lens, something that you would see is very, modern magical stuff, but he was doing it in this kind of culty kind of way. He's like a lot of these cult figures that you see across time, you know, manipulating and utilizing these various will-based powers to draw attention to himself and to make
Yeah.
himself the center of worship. You know, he
Yeah.
managed to convince many women to fall in love with him, and all of his magic was through the powers of touch and through that kind of thing. And he was really for this. You know, we talked about this before. We see this with like Bataille. A lot of this left-handed magic is about experiencing the decadent and pushing it to the point of the absurd to shatter one's reality, you know. And while he's abstaining from some things, like, you know, he's not engaging in overt wealth and stuff, he's diving into the explorations of sex as a form of sacred transcendence. He's trying to shatter his ego and to achieve the perception of the all. And this is something we see across the left-handed path in various ways. You know, it's always eventually it leads to this explosive death of the self and eradication of the self, you know, like in Crowley's Headless Man, right? The Stele of Jew from the PGM is sort of like a classical iteration of this.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and the thing with him, because he came from that monastic sect, you know, he had to be very careful. He had visions, right? And he still had to be very careful. And anybody that writes about him says he was inspirational when he spoke, you know, that I guess we'd call it manic today, but there are a lot of photos that survive of him, and the eyes, you can just see this quality in his eyes that we'd probably call mesmerism or hypnotism today. But one of the things in psychology when you're looking for psychosis is if you can see the white above and below the iris, then they're having somebody's at a peak emotion. And if they sustain that a lot, then you've got to step back from them until they calm down from that emotion. Nearly every photo, except for this one, you can actually see the white above and below his eyes. You know, he's always at that point of ecstasy and madness together. And it inspired other people, inspired the Tsarina. I mean, he could live a life of denial, but everybody else gave them their money to play with. So he didn't need to have any money himself.
Right.
So he just walked that really fine line.
He could eat whatever he wanted. He didn't need a kitchen. He had a royal kitchen.
You know, and he reminds me of some of these figures that we see in the more eastern side. Some of these, you know, you have these wild figure shamans. You know, you see this in esoteric Buddhism as well as some forms of esoteric Shaivism, and where you have these figures who engage in these forms of sexual release in order to achieve transcendence or the breaking of taboo. You know, in these traditions, it's usually the consumption of meat, you know, sometimes the consumption of alcohol, the ingestion of drugs, but it's always about that transcendent pursuit. And I think, you know, with Rasputin, he's clearly getting into a lot of this kind of wildness, you know.
There was something physically about him too, because he was a huge man. Like you see all the photos, he towers over everybody. And he came from a tough area of Russia where you had to be tough to survive. And, you know, it's like the SAS training that they give to the elite soldiers. They train them in intuition as well. So in order to survive, you do get this opening of intuition, and you combine that with a really tough body, right? Somebody that not only couldn't be poisoned, he couldn't be shot, he couldn't be stabbed, and then they wrapped him in chains and threw him in the river and hope he drowned. So, you know, there is something in there that keeps you alive. Yeah.
Like, talk about leaving an impact. The people were so weirded out by him; they couldn't imagine him. You know.
Oh, he's like a Dracula. He's a rock star. He's a Dracula. He's a vampire. He represents that man in black. That's the shadow figure. You know, let's hit the next pick. You might find this guy intriguing just as well. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is 1886.
This is one that always bugs me, because have you read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Well, I've seen the movie since I was a little kid.
Honestly, I haven't read this one. I haven't read this.
Well, you know, I read it once. Oh, I read it once, and it's pretty good, but it's very different than most of the retellings, at least in its essence, because the essence, the big reveal at the end of the original story is it's not that Dr. Hyde has been possessed by a monster. It's that Dr. Like they're the same. Like he is the monster, right? When he takes the potion, it doesn't change his faculty of mind. It just changes his physical. It just changes him physically. He does all these monstrous things because he's evil, right? Where in a lot of the film adaptations, he's been turned into a monster by this potion. And that's not what happens in the original. He's just a vile, horrible person who's enabled. You know,
because in the modern version, he's not responsible for his crimes. He blacks out and he doesn't know what happened.
He's
I don't even remember it.
In the original book, he's very responsible. He's accountable. You know.
Yeah, it's that old. It's that atrocity thing, isn't it? If you put in the position where you can, you know, this is why war crimes happen. You know, you speak to so many people who do interviews about having been through torture, being through the, and they go, you know, they were a nice person, they had a family, but you put them in this situation where they can, and
the banality of evil, right?
Yeah, and that's what it is. You know, it's like he's taking the steroid mix that makes him into this, you know, body that can do whatever it wants, and he does. It gives that excuse for the undeveloped personality to act without consequence. Yeah.
Exactly. And I see this bridging the gap between magic and ancient potions of Medea with our sci-fi, our AI and our digital laboratory. And this is 1886. But let's hit the next pick, because then we'll dive into the heart of the matter here. This is from Carmilla, 1872, Sheridan Le Fanu. And it's one of our, it's not the first vampire story, but it's a very popular one. And our vampire is a female.
Sexual female. You know, sexual with other women. Yeah.
And here it takes on a twist. It's the seductive dark side. And this is where it's a romantic relationship that people have with this over the years in literature. And we'll see this as the theme as we work our way back of how we get enticed by the dark side and by our shadow. And this caused a sensation when it came out too, because they're like, whoa, it's, you know, it's sapphic in nature. So let's hit the next pick, unless you guys have something to say about Carmilla.
Oh, Camilla, I've always loved that story. I remember reading it very young and getting very hot and flustered about it. And it's ripe for a retelling. You know, I've been thinking about doing a rewrite for years of this, like writing a modern play on it, because it doesn't actually say that she sucks blood, but she takes life force. And how many relationships these days have people been in where you're in a relationship with somebody and they just end up sucking the life out of you? And I think that this could be a really good modern retelling of the dangers of making sure that, you know, power bases in a relationship are balanced, you know, you know, without it, you know, an esoteric but not too esoteric one, you know, just that relationships can suck you dry. Be careful. Yeah.
Right. And it's just, you know, it's just part of, again, of this kind of queer horror thing where, you know, queer sexual themes are vilified and seen as monstrous. Empowered women are seen as monstrous. You know, succumbing to these desires is succumbing to temptation of the devil, and the consequence is this, you know, losing of one's soul. You have all this metaphysical damnation, right? So it's a wild kind of a story, very of its time, but also, you know, very interesting.
So hit the next pick. And we've talked about before, just a little bit about the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, configuration of painters that came together, I think, at the Royal Society. But I'd like to talk about as well the pre-Raphaelite Sisterhood, which were the models and muses for these paintings.
Some of them were painters, some of them were painters too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point. We'll drive home. This is 1868. And this is a photo by Julia Margaret Cameron. who was a photographer, and the model there is her name is Marie Spartali, and she was also a painter herself. If you hit the next image, so imagine here's a photo of her, and now here's one of her paintings right here.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and this is the pre-Raphaelite sisterhood, and it's that same iconography in these images. And here she's holding a dove, and if you were to zoom in, you can see a lot of other little details that are metaphysical and occult. Go to the next image. Here is Evelyn de Morgan. She studied Greek, Latin, French, German, and Italian. She was trained in classical literature and mythology, and her parents exposed her to scientific texts as a young girl. So besides being a model, she was also a painter. And here she has a famous painting. And it's about potions. She's doing a potion right there. You see a black cat on the floor at her feet.
The saffron robes and the red hair. This could easily be Medea,
Yeah,
the red
crocus.
shoes.
Yeah, the crocus robe. And there's a lot of occult imagery in this. And this is the same time frame, and they're not as popular as the male artists, Gabriel Rossetti and the other guys. So go to the next image. I want to show you one more. Emma Sandys. She was a painter and a model. Now here she has some playing cards. I don't know if you can interpret those. If it might be too small for you, Snappy, but to me that's tarot. That's a tarot reading. Just saying.
I mean, what did they got there? They got the Jack, 2 aces, and a king.
Yeah, new beginnings, male
Right.
structured, ordered societies working for her, but there's going to be somebody impulsive coming into her life. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I knew there had to be a meaning there because the cards are not random.
Yeah, well, the king of spades would very much represent the male-dominated, male pre-Raphaelite brotherhood. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah,
and
but
they were
aces are always
competing.
new energy.
They were competing against the women at that time, the male artists, because women weren't allowed to necessarily do this. And the males had patronage. They were funded by rich courts. So go to the next image.
Oh, and that was a winning hand, by the way, too. You'd have to have a few cards to beat that one.
At that. Here's Lizzie, Elizabeth Seidel. And she worked for both, this is Ophelia, when she worked with John Everett Milas. And she also worked with Rossetti, Dante. And she was also a painter and a poet herself.
Wild story about this. I went and looked up this painting. So Malay, when he painted this, he spent like weeks and weeks doing the background where he could sit for hours a day. He got her to sit in a tub so that he could get the right proportions right. And he originally had like a fire underneath her tub, but he got so into it, he forgot about the keeping the tub hot. And he just kept painting her for hours on end until she eventually like demanded to get out. She wound up getting sick.
Yeah, she got sick.
Yeah, and her parents demanded extra money as payment for medical expenses. And he says he did pay.
Yeah. The nice thing about the pre-Raphaelites, because it's my favorite genre of art, I loved it right from when I was very young, is that they actually took the model out of the prostitute genre. So in those days, if you were an artist model, it was expected that you were sleeping with them. So they started to actually get these empowered women. And the word star that we use today was actually a French word for prostitute. So if you were a star, if you were if you were a professional lady, right, that used to sell your image, it was the same as being a prostitute. And these women were given a lot of flack because they were from society for being in these paintings. Are you an artist model? Well, okay, but because there was this real intimacy between the artist and what they were painting, and they wanted to restore all of that. So, that was a very interesting rebellion that they did mount as well.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So let's go to the next image. And oh, right there, that's a Beata Beatrix, and that's Rossetti, and that's Lizzie right there, Elizabeth Seidel. And this one has iconography in it too. If you were to zoom in, there's lots of occult images in there.
Yeah.
You know, you can see the bird.
After his wife died, it represents the death and ascension of his wife to heaven.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hit the next image.
Mm-hmm.
1857. I wanted to throw in Elizabeth Gaskell. She wrote a biography on the Bronte sisters, on Charlotte Bronte in particular, and Charles Dickens published her series of Gothic tales, which she wrote. And see, Charles Dickens was into the Goth scene, into publishing it. And in these tales, talks about witches, women escaping castles from dark bearing overlords. It's the Gothic genre. And she also put on the map the Bronte sisters, because at the time, it became scandalous, her biography on the Bronte sisters. If you go to the next image, I'll show you that. Here they are, the Bronte sisters, and there's Anne, Charlotte, and Emily. One wrote Wuthering Heights, one wrote Jane Eyre.
Mm-hmm.
These are classics.
Mm-hmm.
And they also had a brother who wrote too. What was the name of Bronwell?
Mm-hmm.
He was also an author. So you have 4 authors in this family, the Bronte sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the biography by Elizabeth is pretty spicy. She makes it spicy, let's say. So, and that's part of the sub theme is not only is the literature spicy, these people led spicy lives, or they had, the unusual lives. Because back then, people had very normal lives. It was, you didn't leave more than 50 miles from your house. You didn't live to be that old. You couldn't read and write. An average woman couldn't read and write then. And these are women who are writing novels, competing with the authors of their time, with the top authors. Now go for it.
And sibling rivalry too. I would imagine competing with each other.
Oh, in the family, definitely. They competed with each other. Because they all came out about the same time too. Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, like they're published around the same time. Like, so which sisters like competing to be the top rock star?
Wow.
And this is a God. These are considered Gothic novels, Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, because they take place in settings where these female characters have to deal with. It's all the things they have to deal with in that time frame back in the day, and it's brooding. It's big buildings, big castles. People wear dark outfits. People are controlling. There's loss. There's lovers are lost. In every book, a lover is lost, let's say.
Wuthering Heights, I must have read 100 times. It's one of my favorite all-time novels. So, like, the whole world is reconstructed so well. You're on the moors. I mean, Kate Bush, I don't know if you guys like Kate Bush.
Oh, she did a song, yeah.
Yeah, but she was more goth than goth and very esoteric. She came up through some of the magical orders in England. And her initial song, she wrote that song when she was 14 and won a competition in England for it to be taken on by a record company. But to this day, people get together they call it the Most Wuthering Heights Day, and they all dress up in red and do the Kate Bush dance, and it's inspiring the whole subculture itself now. So, yeah.
Well, Kate could sing, she could dance, she could write, she could paint. Just she's a talented person.
Amazing.
So let's hit the next image. Speaking of painting, because we've been talking about literature, I want to throw in some paintings and some art as well. That's, I don't know if we consider it Gothic, but it's this is called The Fallen Angel, Alexandre Cabanel, 1847, and it's about these images I will show are about how Lucifer or Satan becomes seductive.
Well, we got to talk about that because, you know, this is one of the huge things that Byron does, right? We see Byron is responsible for this with his retelling of Cain, his closet play there, where it reimagines Lucifer as this romantic figure who's freeing people from the tyranny of God, you know, and he offers to, you know, enlighten and to bring, you know, to bring us into enlightenment, you know, and this, you know, Lucifer at this time becomes this kind of figure of Enlightenment humanism and of this breaking free of the bonds of religion, right? Whether it was like Anglican, Protestant, or Catholic, you know.
And so Thomas Lawrence's The Fallen Angel in 1797, you know, he's so beautiful. Satan is so beautiful in that. And the church was very upset that people were falling in love with Satan in 1797. You know?
And that's the something, falling in love with the dark side, and that the dark side offers immortality. Let's go to the next image. And we've seen this one, Joseph Gis, La Genie du Mal. Another good-looking angel right there, but we know who that is and who it stands for. So it's a contradiction.
Yeah, it's the, you know, it's that whole thing about the dark side is seductive and it's attractive and it's taboo, and you know, we see this right from the earliest aspects of the Bible. You know, go back and read Genesis, and it's easy to see it as an you know, I have read several interpretations of the Genesis story. I'm not saying that this is the right one, it's just a one where they imagine the snake is representing foreign men, you know, and that Eve is an empowered woman who's going off with foreign men. And that's the issue. They don't want her to be seduced by foreigners. And this is a theme that we see parallel in other religions. Like I think of the story of Shiva and Parvati, or Shiva and Sati, where we see this, you know, he's coming from this one culture that is considered immoral and debased, and he's hanging out with the goblins. And then they come into this royal culture of Parvati, which is all beautiful and happy. And the first time they say no and Sati dies, so the second time the family has to say yes, you know, because the first time the daughter literally kills herself in this kind of Gothic, you know, we were talking about Romeo and Juliet. You could say that Sati and Shiva is kind of the, you know, one of these proto origins of something like this. But this, I think, is deeply, deeply primal and mythic in many cultures, is what I'm trying to get at, right? It's this fear of the other. What happens when your daughter falls in love with a different strange culture and she tries to leave and form something different? What happens when your kids try to break free of your traditions and do something different? And so much of the Luciferian stuff is that other strange foreigner, right? Just as Dionysus is the foreigner, right? In like, it's also, we see this, right? We got to remember the Christians are rebelling against that Dionysian cult, and they're trying to flip it on its head and take it as their own. And so they have to vilify the foreigner as much as they have to love the foreigner. It becomes this weird dance that they play, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, talking about flipping things, I mean, Lucifer means the light bringer, the morning star, and the morning star is Venus, the goddess of love. And what we have in the Bible is that actually flipping of love into something that is so, you know, they're making love the dark side, you know,
they make
instead
it
of
the dark
being,
side.
And
well, you know, it comes out of like, there's this, you know, it comes out of these weird Platonic ideas that then get distorted. In Platonism, you have this division of Aphrodite into Aphrodite Pandemos, the lover of all, and Aphrodite Urania, which is that pure abstracted love beyond creation, you know. But then in the later Christian tradition, that Pandemos, instead of being celebrated, becomes vilified, and only Urania is celebrated as, you know, the sacred mother.
There's also Aphrodite Porneo as well, which was the, you know, the the erotic side, the pornographic side, so as well. So there was the
Oh yeah,
triple
there are many
aspect to her as well.
epithets. It's
Yeah.
just like within
Yeah.
Plato, he does this kind of duality, right?
Yeah.
Which then later theologians directly are citing as like, this is where we're getting this kind of shit from. You know? So it's like, it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
They're but yeah, it's this division that
Yeah.
you know, the whore and the sacred virgin.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that. I think Lucifer's also, right? He's that eroticized masculine other that
Yeah.
represents this potential foreign power, you know,
Yeah.
that the patriarchal Christian elite don't want their young daughters running off with.
Yeah. But I mean, at what point was he in transition? Because he started as a woman. He started female, and he ends up in the Christian tradition as a masculine. So he's a god in transition. So
yeah,
that's ironic that you say that. You guys are riffing on that, because that's, if you go to the next image, this riffs on that. Oh, it got skipped. Go to the next image. Let's see. Right there. Here we go. All right. This is Annie Lister. Have you ever heard of Annie Lister from 1817? She wore only men's black clothing, and she started doing that after her female lover was married off. Because in ancient times, in those times, who you marry, it's not in your power. Her parents decided that she had to marry somebody else, and to mourn her lover's loss, she wore all black. And they gave her the nickname Gentleman Jack. So if you ever heard that term Gentleman Jack, that comes from Annie Lister. She was a diarist. And some people consider her the first female lesbian author, let's say, because she put it down. She wrote down what she was experiencing. And from that moment on, she would wear all black after her lover was married off, in a state of mourning wear, let's say.
Yeah. My husband's looking through the window going, we've got to go soon. I have to take my father to eye surgery this morning. So I've just ducked in quickly before I have to do that. So I will say adieu to you right now. But Annie Lister is amazing. She was also a code expert and a code breaker. And a lot of her stuff was written in code as well. So a great intellect as well. But that real Gothic rebel character, that changed society. It was so good to see.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Shay. We'll talk some more, and hopefully you can come back and have.
Hopefully you can join us next week.
Well, yeah. Now I've got it all set up in the new house. I'm ready. I'm ready for anything.
All right. Well, much love, Shay.
I've done a little quick video. I don't know if you want to put it down there, but it sort of summarizes some of the things we're talking about in 10 minutes. So
absolutely, I'll post it up here in a second. Yeah, let me see. I just got to share my screen here. Okay, and then it's called The Birth of Gothic Culture here. 300 years of magic. The dark birth of Gothic culture. 300 years of magic and rebellion, and you can find that at Magic Magazine. The link is also in the description if you want to check that out. And it's an awesome little 10-minute summary of all we've been talking about here. So please go support Shay and her work.
Thank you very much. And if any of my followers are watching this, please go and have a look at some of the rest of the work by Dion and Snappy. Beautiful academic intellectual stuff that's brought down to an accessible level for us, and it's such a privilege to be able to participate with you guys this morning. I feel honored. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming today. Take care. All right, we'll talk soon.
Bye.
All right, awesome. So Gentleman Jack.
I like how she said she wrote in code. I didn't know that. She was a code breaker.
Well, I imagine she would have to, right? In order to be able to talk about any of this kind of stuff. I did see that there was a BBC TV show about her. I need to go check it out. She sounds like an incredible person, just wild stuff.
So if you go one picture back, I put in, or no, the other way, the other direction.
Oh, sorry.
I threw in Mary Shelley.
Right, Mary Shelley, the
Because
Goth.
I know you were still wanted to bring up the importance, because she is important. What she did for literature.
Absolutely, right. The birth of science fiction as we understand it. Some people will go as all the way back to Lucian, right? But modern science fiction as a genre, literary genre, really is kind of quintessentially created with her and Frankenstein. Um, and she's just this incredible person who was so influential in her own right because of the libertine kind of life that she lived, and her connection to these larger than life figures, right? Her husband was a romantic poet, Percy Shelley, who was celebrated and loved and died young, right? Famously, we talked about this before, but when he died in a shipwreck, his heart got calcified, and Lord Byron managed to get the heart. There was a fight over the heart, but Lord Byron managed to get it and ensured that Mary Shelley got it. And she wrapped a poem that he wrote for her and kept it on her person until she died. When her son found it in her desk. There's all these wild stories about her that kind of live larger than her. You know, I wanted to talk about, though, was her second novel, which is such a hugely overlooked work, and that is called The Last Man. And I really think The Last Man is just so quintessentially Gothic in many ways. A lot of people go to it hoping to see some kind of crazy post-apocalyptic thing, but really, it's a Roman Clef. So it's really about her and her relationship with Percy Shelley and Byron and other characters in her life, and it kind of tells their story through this apocalypse. And the idea in that novel is that the world is ending because of human hubris and greed. We are being wiped out by a virus, and we neglected to do anything to stop it, and now we're all on the verge of collapse, right? But nature is going to continue, life will continue, the world will continue, but humanity will end. And for her, this was really about the death of sort of the kind of Byronic hero, the death of romanticism, the death of certain aspects. And this is something I really liked about her, is that her apocalypse isn't a total apocalypse. Nature continues, life goes on. The last man isn't the final man, even though he is a final thing, right? It's like the death of a perspective. She was seeing the death of this kind of humanism, this romantic humanism that she was a part of, that romantic movement, and she was writing its elegy. It's one of the most Gothic things I've ever read. It's long, it's brooding, and it's deeply character driven. Really, really interesting. So everyone should go check out The Last Man. It's in a couple volumes. It'll take you a long time to get through it, but it's well worth it. Well worth it. It really made me think so much about COVID.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like it sounds like a modern novel, not an ancient, not an old novel. It sounds like a modern book where nature survives, but man gets wiped out.
Right. Just kind of wild.
Or an M. Night Shyamalan movie. So let's go skip ahead a couple pictures. Boom, right here. Washington Irving, 1820, Sleepy Hollow. And here you see the headless horseman wearing his aristocratic looking outfit, his black outfit. And he's not holding a pumpkin, he's holding his head. And we've discussed this theme in several episodes, whether it's John the Baptist or Brahm or Saint Denis of Paris in the Oriflamme. There's so much out there with the iconography of a headless man and what that means in the occult.
Yeah, we talked about Aleister Crowley, right, in the PGM, and the headless rite, the Stella of Jew, right? This idea of destroying the lower self to become the highest self, to achieve that ionic life, or to become, to become the hidden god, to ascend the throne, all this kind of stuff,
And then Salome calls for
right?
the head of
The
John the
head of
Baptist
John the
after doing
Baptist,
her dance of the veils.
right? I must kiss of your mouth, Wakan, right?
And after that,
Joel.
John, for 3 days, his head flies around the city of Jerusalem, uh, speaking about the king. And Brahm's head is buried under the Tower of London, used in prophecy. And with Saint Denis, they dipped the French flag, the oriflamme, in his head, the blood of his head when it was beheaded in battle. And there was a lot. It deals with oracles, prophecy, this headless theme. But here, it takes on a Gothic twist. Everything is dark, and the headless horseman comes out at night to get you.
Well, it also takes on this weird kind of, it's again this constant theme we see in a lot of this Gothic stuff is the attacking and the exclusion of the other. What is the essential story of the headless horseman? Is that you have this city dweller, this rich aristocratic school teacher who's coming into our rural town, and he wants to hook up with our rural women. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to scare him the F away with our Hessian headless Halloween prank, you know? That's the story essentially, right? It's one of shame and exclusion. And yeah, but it's interesting too, right? They have to create this monster to keep away the outside other, right?
Mm.
Who's both they're terrified of, but it's like the outside other. Like I always think about the version of this that's like burned into my mind is the Disney version, because I watched it like 1,000 times as a kid. Every Halloween I watched it, and I just keep thinking about how effeminate and ridiculous they make the school teacher, but yet they don't want him around, and he's this threat to their women, but he's this bumbling idiot who's terrified of this. It's like it's just classic, propaganda. um Very, very Victorian, yes. But what I think is interesting is that story's taken on new life, right? And it's become, because of its celebration and connection to Halloween, it's
Yeah.
taken on that kind of Halloween thing. And like I only know it in the cartoon Disney form largely. And then there are some people now who would only know it in the Tim Burton form. And if you watch the Tim Burton form, it's like now it's this whole creepy occult mystery about summoning the dead. And, it's more of a celebration of Hammer films than it is anything than anything dealing with like, the original source material.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like that version though. The one with Johnny Depp.
Great. Yeah,
That's
it's a lot of
that's
fun. With the cartoon bright red blood, the aesthetics are amazing. It's super goth,
All right. We'll hit the next image. And here's an image that Shay was talking about. Blake, Satan in all of his glory.
Right.
Oh, or I think she was talking about Sir Thomas Lawrence. We have that image too as well. But here you could see in all his glory. That's what Blake and Blake did a series of works for authors as well. He would try to bring to life their works, let's say their writings.
Right. Well, William Blake, we know, was deeply, deeply into the occult. He's one of the quintessential occult painters and artists of his time, and this is showing his magical prowess on full display, right? Just a totally interesting character, right? He always, a lot of his images, people may be familiar with his paintings of the demiurge. He did famous pictures of the fairies, Oberon and Titiana and Puck. Always doing these really interesting, magical kind of figures. just a really, really, really amazing character, right? The Great Red Dragon. People remember that because that became another thing that became totally mystified and made magical. The Great Red Dragon was at the heart of the Hannibal Lecter movies,
Yeah.
right?
When he's becoming, huh? Can you see? Oh, that was a crazy movie. So let's hit the next image. And this is the one that Shay was talking about.
Right.
1797, Sir Thomas Lawrence, The Fallen Angel. And this is where you're getting characters from history that are normally scary and vile are now seductive.
Right.
And calling to you. To me, this is the vampire. It's part of it is the romance with the dark side, let's say.
Right. Well, Lucifer, right, is supposed to be the fallen, beautiful angel, right? Or what even Shay was getting at, right? The morning star, right? This is connecting to Attis. So there's this idea, right? The morning star comes down to earth and needs to return back, Cybele and Attis, and it has to go through the castration. We've talked about this numerous times, right? Where Attis transitions and becomes the feminine Cybele, right? When he's bound with the nymphs and he's, in on the earth, he is Attis, but then in the heights of the ideal, he is Cybele or Aphrodite Urania, right? So we see this transition of the gender between these two gods, right? Saturn and Saturnia, another version that we see in Virgil, right? So this is like a deep pagan theme that kind of gets reduced and obscured in the Christian,
Mm-hmm. Well, last week you brought up something that I wanted to talk about. One was Sturm und Drang.
Right.
So it was that storm and sorrow.
Right. Pre-romantic German literary and theatrical art movement.
And Faust, Wolfgang Faust. Goethe.
Goethe.
Yeah,
right.
Well, Johann Wolfgang Goethe, and he wrote and did Faust. Go to the next image, and we'll get into that a little bit. So here's Faust. Here's an image or illustration they did from the work that he did, and it's showing the figure in black and summoning a demon, the devil, and there's all the trappings of alchemy. You can see all the different alchemist tools around. They tried to ban some of this stuff earlier because when Goethe did it's something called Sorrows of Young Werther. Have you heard of this?
Okay, we gotta take a moment and talk about.
Yeah, that's Goethe, why I wanted to bring all that. So I just wanted to bring up Faust to get the backstory, because Faust on its own is unique, and we could talk about this wizards and the devil and stuff. But his earlier work, which is not too Gothic itself, it caused people to go crazy.
So we gotta first you gotta talk about Goethe, right? Goethe is to Germany and the German language what Shakespeare is to England and the English language. Just to put, to show you the kind of influence and the importance of him. First off, he is kind of the most influential figure in the Sturm und Drang movement. And
Storm and stress. That's what it means. Storm and stress.
Which is all about it's romantic, but it's more about this return to nature, this return to the individual, this return to the self. Okay. And as a young man, he's just this inspired writer, and he writes the Sorrows of Young Werther, and this causes this massive reaction, right? It's a tragedy where in the end the characters commit suicide, and it inspires people to do copycat suicide.
No, they would dress up as the characters. They would dress up as the characters and go commit suicide. And this is in 1774.
Yeah.
1774. Imagine you're dressing up as a character from your favorite opera and play and going out and committing suicide.
Right. but it was this romanticism and this call to emotion and to expression and to feeling was just so profound and was such a revolution in Europe at the time. It's hard to imagine the kind of firestorm of creativity that this sparked.
Oh, they
right?
banned it. You couldn't perform it. It's like we talk about banned records, like you can't listen to Black Sabbath. Well, you can't go see Sturm und Drang. You ain't going down to see Goethe's play. No.
Well, eventually, though, Goethe becomes the height of German culture. He becomes the most celebrated poet of the nation. This is before the nation, right? He winds up creating the idea of a German nation, right? There's almost no idea, like there almost isn't a Germany. Like it's hard to talk about the importance of this man for his culture.
And
right?
Wagner's inspired by, this is all
everyone's
the continuity.
Inspired by, right? Everyone's
Burma.
Yeah. And Faust is kind of his quintessential play. It's his most important play in terms of having like long-lasting reverberations across Europe, right? There are other things that have a bigger impact at home in Germany, but in terms of his worldwide fame, it's Faust Part 1.
Dr. Faustus.
This is the quintessential wizard, the selling of one's soul to the devil. This is the there's Marlowe who also does a version of this, but the one that is most famous is Goethe. And Goethe is just such a wild man, and he's pulling from so many different wild elements. To put this in perspective, right? I've been talking about for a long time, for the last little bit, various kind of obscured goddesses and obscured figures in the Greco-Roman tradition. And one of my favorite characters that I've been really getting into lately is, just let me bring this up, is this figure here who's called Balbo or Bubo.
Oh yeah, Balbo. Yeah. It's the legs and legs in a vulva and eyes.
Well, sometimes it's legs in the vulva and eyes. Sometimes it's a woman with her vulva spread riding on a boar. Goethe, okay, back when he wrote this, is making a reference to Balbo, and scholars don't know where he got this from, right? I want to read for you this is a line from Faust, right? And this is Goethe. So it says, "The witches' chorus. The witches ride to Blocksberg top. The stubble is yellow and green the crop. They gather on the mountainside. Sir Urian comes to preside. We are riding over crag and brink. The witches fart. The billy goats stink." Then it says voice. "Old Balbo comes alone right now. She is riding on a mother sow." And then we get the next line. Witches' chorus. "Give honor to whom honors due. Dame Balbo, lead our retinue. A real swine and mother too. The richest crew will follow you." And people wonder to this day how Goethe knew about this, because we've only confirmed recent images of Balbo riding on a boar, as this kind of sow mother. Anyway, just really wild stuff. Goethe was deeply connected to a lot of this kind of magical imagery. And he knew all of this ancient Greek stuff like the back of his hand, And the tale of Faust is a beautiful one, because we see the demon Mephistopheles, right? And at first, when you engage with this work, you think that Mephistopheles is the monster, But by the end of the story, you are confronted with the reality that Faust was the monster, and that it's all the devil did was give the doctor what he asked for.
Yeah, our own human emotions have everything we need: envy, greed, jealousy,
right?
fear.
The devil doesn't need to do much. He just needs to enable, right? Power corrupts, absolutely, right?
And so this was a popular story at this time, and this is
huge.
And so I want to talk about another story that came out around the same time, 1787. If we go to the next image, and this is from Friedrich von Schiller, the Ghost Seer.
Schiller was Goethe's partner in crime, best friend, and they did a lot of works together. But he was also a great writer and poet and playwright in his own right.
Oh yeah, they're interconnected. That's why I put them in. And then the story of the Ghost Seer, it's a Count von O. And it's set at carnival time in Venice. And you got a Jesuit secret society. It's intriguing read. And this is like you said, they were friends. There's a movement now. So as we were talking a lot about the 1920s and 1800s, now we're at the late 17s. This is 1780. And these are the rock stars of the time. Is Goethe, Faust is popular, Friedrich von Schiller. And there's something else that becomes popular. In 1780, to do a stage play of a book that came out in 1764. If you go to the next image. And this is the Castle of Otranto. And this is by Horace Walpole. And this is an image that was done in a book based on it. And here's the skeleton. Here you can see a skeleton character. And this was a famous Gothic work at the time. Very popular, the Castle of Otranto. It's about castles and escaping castles and outfits and romance and women in the dark side. Very popular read at the time.
Oh, wow. This looks so wild.
Yeah, von Schiller, the Ghost Seer. And like, or no, Castle of Otranto. And they turned it into a play, a stage play. Because that's what they did. But we saw the power of the stage play in the Sorrows of Werther, of young Werther. People would dress up and commit suicide. So these plays in these theater had such an effect at the time. It's almost like City Dionysia. It's taking it back to when the play served as a form of the theater served as a form of church, a form of mystery rite. And that's what these are, mystery rites into plays or paintings or songs. They're trying to contain it. Let's go to the next image. And maybe I'll have you read this. Heinrich Ossenfelder. This is from Der Vampir, 1748. And this is considered, some people consider it the first vampire novel because it's using the word vampire.
Interesting.
And it's a good read.
All right, let's see. And as softly thou art sleeping, to thee shall I come creeping, and thy life's blood drain away. And so shalt thou be trembling, for thus shall I be kissing, and death's threshold thou'lt it be crossing, with fear in my cold arm. And last shall I thee question, compared to such instruction, what are a mother's charms? Ooh, that's very well written.
Yeah. And this is 1748, Der Vampir. And these are German works. See, if France takes the run of things in the 1800s, and 1700s is Germany that's rocking things. Both of them over time, let's say. But there's always been a lot of literary stuff coming out, challenging each other. And it's through culture and religion, changing times. Because mind you, centuries before this, no one could write about stuff like this. You're restricting what you could write about. Right. Everything is either the Bible, or you could write books about demons, like the Witch's Hammer or something. And so it wasn't until we can get all these Gothic novels that they can bring out the mystery rite. That's what it is. They're using these romantic novels to bring out the mystery rite. And this was a poem, Your Vampire.
It's always been so that they're using fiction and story to bring out the mystery, right? Since the get-go, right? All of these plays have always been about the mystery. They're both fiction and both true, right? It's powerful, powerful stuff. And there was a period in Western culture where the church did try to suppress it, but it didn't succeed.
yeah, the Dark Ages, huh?
Right.
So hit the next image, and this is my last. I got two more images to talk about, and this is 1704.
Oh wow,
we're at 1704, and this is a drawing based on it, or a painting based on it, and this is the Mysteries of Udolpho. The Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe. It's considered the first Gothic novel in English. And go to the next image. And I want to show you Anne Radcliffe right there. So here's Anne, and she's considered the foremother of this Gothic novel Renaissance, let's say. Gothic literature Renaissance.
Oh, interesting. 1704. Wow.
Yeah, The Mysteries of Udolpho. And once again, it's a castle, and there's lovers and deaths and aristocracy and gloomy backdrops and loss. And she's considered the progenitor of this style.
Oh, that's wild. I'll have to check that out. Count Udolpho.
The Mysteries of Udolpho.
Okay.
The Mysteries of Udolpho, 1704. Anne Radcliffe.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know Shay was here. Like these ones, all the ones I'm just talking about, I know this is her
wheelhouse.
Yeah. And so we'll have to chat her up next time about that.
Yeah, we'll have to dive back deeper into those particular things, but we definitely got at least one more episode where we have to deep dive and explore even further into this Gothic stuff, because we got to go now into some of the more wild. We still haven't talked about Elizabeth Bathory. We still haven't talked about Dracula himself.
Gilles de Rais.
Right?
Gilles de
Rais. We haven't talked about Gilles de Rais, right? We haven't talked about the people who inspired the Satanic Panic 100 years later, right?
Yeah. Well, because we're looking at the art that they inspired before we get to, because back now we're going to get into people. At this point, you're not getting into literature, you're getting into people, iconic figures from history that, but in some cases they did write literature, like Radu wrote poetry.
Right. It's interesting. But these figures, they take on a mythical, air that reverberates across time, like with Gilles de Rais, he becomes the boogeyman in La Bas, which then starts the Satanic Panic, right? Which inspired A.E. Waite to write his Satanic Panic book, which inspired further Satanic Panics,
And I was considering J.K. Hoisman. I was like, well, should we put him? We'll see. We'll see.
Well, when we get to Gilles de Rais, we can reference Hoisman because, we did talk about him briefly when we were talking a bit about the Satanic Panic stuff in France, but yeah.
This is all Satanic Panic. If you notice, everything that we've been covering is all Satanic Panic. This is everything that society considers the other. And this is the rebel on the outside of town wearing black. And you could see it through history. It's always happening. There's always someone there.
Well, as soon as you're going to make a demon, we talked about this. As soon as you vilify something and you make it taboo, our human nature is going to call some people to go explore it. They got to. It's like it's just how we are. What do you mean don't? What do you mean no?
What do you mean exactly? Well,
right?
If I could tell everyone out there, like, subscribe, share, leave comments. We love comments. And if you have ideas or people that we need to talk about, because there's so many of these people. This is all an education for me. I'm learning about all these wild figures from history.
Right. It's this stuff runs deep, and there's always things that we miss or we forget, or more to explore, and we're just big nerds having fun. So send us all of your Gothic recommendations, and maybe we'll talk about them on the next episode. And make sure you go and support our dear friend Shay, who was kind enough to join us, and check out her channel Magic Magazine and her video that she did on the dark history of Goth. So thank you guys for tuning in. This has been so much fun. Like and subscribe, like Dion said. And Dion, any final words?
Stay blessed. Live your best life. Take chances.
All right. Much love, everyone. Peace. Take care. Until next time, stay blessed.